the guests who join me here. Henry Newman, Director of Open Europe, hello, and also Dawn Foster, columnist for The Guardian. Welcome to you both. Let me get your thoughts first of all, Dawn. The Labour front bench fell in behind the Yvette Cooper amendment today, but it's fallen.
Yes, it has, and it's completely unclear what happens now. If Brady passes, then Theresa May will go back to Brussels, and it's very, very clear that Brussels will simply reject it. So it's just a delay in exercise in many ways. It's very difficult to understand what Theresa May is doing at the moment, apart from trying to hold her party together rather than trying to lead the actual country. So it's, obviously she'll go back to Brussels. Ireland have been very clear that they won't support any changes to the backstop, so this is just a delay in exercise at this point.
The one thing that is different, Henry, is that she's managed to pull in the ardent Eurosceptics, the ERG, to fall in, we think, behind Sir Graham Brady's amendment tonight, which will send her back to Brussels to open up the withdrawal agreement, and that perhaps is significant.
I think that is significant. I think the other thing is that she hasn't lost control of the overall Brexit process, so there are not going to be a series of indicative votes, and she's not going to be forced at this stage to go to Brussels and beg for an extension of Article 50, which of course the EU could say no to anyway, or put conditions on. So I think she'll be pleased. She'll hope that the Brady amendment passes, and that gives her a mandate to go to Brussels and to ask for a reopening of the withdrawal agreement, which is what she said she would do today. Now that's a big, tall order. But what we have seen is the different sides of the Conservative Party. On the one hand, Ed Vaizey and Nicky Morgan. On the other, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Steve Baker, coming together around a Kit Morehouse brokered deal. It's a bit like getting pandas to mate to get these two wings of the party to actually come together around anything. So that's a big victory. The problem is it doesn't really have much reference to what's actually negotiable in Brussels.
When we look at the Yvette Cooper amendment, there were some concerns about the constitutional implications of MPs trying to take the timetable and the process away from the government. Do you think that might have brought some of the Conservative Remainers behind Theresa May?
I think it might have done. I think also a lot of people were very concerned about the fact that any form of delay of Article 50 and Brexit would be seen as a possible risk for the entire process. Understandably, a lot of MPs wanted a lot more clarity. A lot of people are very concerned about what crashing out with no deal would mean, and I think that will assuage some people. But to take Henry's metaphor there, yes, you have got these two pandas to mate, but they're both sterile. We're going to go back to Brussels. Nothing is going to happen.
We don't know that. I think what we can expect that the Malthouse amendment, or the Malthouse plan, isn't going to work in its exact form. But I think the EU are also facing difficulties here, right? Because the second referendum doesn't look like it's happening. They're desperate to avoid no deal. They got into complete confusion last week about what would actually happen to the Irish border in the event of a breakdown. And ultimately, we're talking about one or two lines, the bit on the exit from the backstop, in a treaty that runs to 600 pages. Is it worth letting it all fall apart for that? I don't think so.
But won't they look at the size of the vote behind the Yvette Cooper amendment tonight and say, look, if we play hardball on the withdrawal agreement, we don't give Theresa May what she wants. The reality is that softer Brexit, a closer relationship with the EU, that's going to open up. Perhaps even no Brexit opens up. So why would we give the Prime Minister something in this 2-week period?
I think at the moment, one of the big issues is that Theresa May is going back to Brussels and saying that this is what I wanted. Now I want something different. And it's Ireland have been very, very clear that any changes to the backstop would be unworkable. They would make things very, very difficult. And obviously Theresa May has to keep the 10 DUP MPs on side. But I think at this point she does risk breaking up the union at this point.
Wouldn't she say to them, look, it was the same on the other side. If you hadn't had ratification in the European Parliament, you would have been saying we need to reopen this and get something extra to get it through the European Parliament. This was always the process, wasn't it? Ratification had to happen. If you can't get it, you have to look at the deal.
That's exactly right. If you can't get this through the Commons, we can think this works perfectly with the theory of the European Union, but if it can't get through and can't survive contact with Westminster, which it didn't, if the deal risked falling apart, I think she's trying to salvage it. And actually, we're in this ironic position where the thing that risks a hard border in Ireland is a backstop designed to solve the problem of the hard border.
Sir Vince Cable said tonight in an interview we did with him a little earlier that this was just raising expectations foolishly. Yeah. Is there some compromise that the two sides could find on the backstop? I don't even know whether it would be acceptable to the ERG, but could you add something legal to the withdrawal agreement? Perhaps not reopen the text, but add something legal that gives them a sunset clause?
I don't think so at this point. I think what we're seeing tonight is Theresa May trying to hold her party together, because clearly a few weeks ago it all fell apart. So she has to decide whether or not to see, you know, the complete kamikaze collapse of the Conservatives or the complete kamikaze collapse of any form of Brexit deal. And obviously 2 weeks ago, you know, she chose to try and push Brexit forward. The Tories pushed back, Labour pushed back as well, and now the Conservatives have come together. But I just can't see it happening. I can't see.
You were talking about the sterile pandas, the two sides of the party that can never come together and produce anything beneficial. But actually, what has happened in the last 24 hours, and goodness me, we've got all these amendments to consider, but there is something else, and that is this compromise, the Kit Malthouse compromise, as it's been called, which has brought the likes of Nicky Morgan and the ERG together around a plan. So does this Graham Brady amendment tonight, does that lay open the path to that kind of compromise?
I mean, it does. I don't think that in its current form it can go forward. I do think you can do certain things. So it's going to need to be legally binding. It's going to need to be at least a mini treaty. So it could be a side agreement, which is a treaty, has a full status of legally binding international agreement between the EU and the UK that makes it clear the circumstances in which the UK could leave the backstop. And that can be bringing greater clarity and sharpness to what is already a big fudge. Because the fact is, the withdrawal agreement is contradictory. It says on the one hand that the backstop would be temporary, and it says on the other hand it applies unless and until a future relationship comes along. The EU is saying, well, look, by the way, there aren't any future relationships that will work. And the UK is quite legitimately saying, well, you can't in good faith sign up to something that lasts unless and until there's a future relationship if you don't think there can be any other future relationships. So I don't think it's that unreasonable to ask for some more clarity here.
And won't she say, given that we've had a series of amendments tonight, or albeit they're now looking to the future 2 weeks when they can vote again on these amendments, but couldn't she say to the EU, look, we've had votes on other amendments that would potentially bring about these indicative votes and they've failed, so this is the only deal in town at the moment?
She could do, but again, you know, she's had 2 years and she's put forward this withdrawal agreement that she thought was acceptable, and it was acceptable to the EU and Ireland. It was acceptable, she thought, to the UK, and there's still no movement. You know, Leo Varadkar has been very clear that he won't be happy with the Brady Amendment, and there was a poll yesterday saying that in the event of a no-deal Brexit, then, you know, the majority of people would want to see an Irish unity poll. So I think that this. At the moment, I think this basically tries to hold together the Conservative Party at the risk of breaking up the entire UK.
Okay. The tellers are about to come back in.